What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Buffalo Dash. Probably one of the more important episodes we'll probably have this season, especially with this upcoming game we have this week. We are at number 19 ranked USC in the Coliseum, and arguably one of the biggest games since 2016, which is crazy to think about that it's been 4 years that we've gotten to this point. But this game really could decide who has the better path to the Pac-12 championship. Kieran, I want to pose this question to you. Can Colorado beat USC?
Yeah, man, I think we can. So, this season has obviously taken a lot of turns that, neither of us really anticipated. No one, obviously, that no one's anticipated. We knew that we didn't know what we didn't know coming into the season. We knew that we didn't know what to expect. But as the season's begun to unfold, I think that Colorado's shown that they're capable of playing with teams that, were ranked better than them coming into the season.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, USC's proven that while they've been able to stay alive in all of their games, they're very capable of playing down to the level of their opponents when their opponents are not as talented as them. And so I think that, their win over Arizona is a perfect example of that. I think the fact that they they had a sizable lead in that game, managed to blow that lead and then, managed to get away with, I think it was like a 3-point win. That kind of, that's the kind of thing that really could jeopardize USC's chances in this game. And, Colorado, on the other hand, has proven its ability to play up to the level of some of its opponents and has, exceeded our expectations thus far. And so I think that those are all reasons to be optimistic about the Buffs' chances in this game. But how about yourself?
I think they have a chance. I've seen two very different USC teams. The USC team that played Arizona and ASU looked very beatable. They like you said, they looked like they were playing down to their opponent. They weren't playing their brand of football. But then last week they played a much more complete game against Utah. It seemed like they were clicking on all cylinders. And that's the kind of USC team that we expected it to come out of. So I definitely think it's really going to depend on what USC team shows up. And for the Buffs, the way UCLA played against Oregon last week makes that win that we beat UCLA look much better. Considering they didn't have DTR starting and they really put up a great fight against a amazing Oregon team. I think if we need to beat them, we need to play a complete game of football. The game against UCLA, there was no doubt we played a complete game of football for 2 quarters. The game against Stanford, it seemed like we played a more complete game, but it still wasn't that 4 quarters of complete lockdown defense that we saw. And against this USC team, sure, we beat a Stanford and we beat a UCLA. That's all well and good. But if you really want to have a chance to beat this very, very good USC team who has a lot of talent, who has a bunch of good coaches, we need to play a complete game of football. And I think it's really going to come down to that defense. The offense really isn't the problem. If they keep doing what they're doing, if they keep moving the ball well, running the ball, sticking to what they know and sticking to what works, they're going to score points. But it's really going to come down to that defense, especially in that fourth quarter in a tight game. Can they make the crucial stop and can they play complete football that we haven't seen them do for the past 2 games?
So I totally agree. And so here's another example of the unexpected outcomes that we are seeing out of the CU team compared to what we predicted at the beginning of the season, right? Is that we sort of came into the season expecting to rely primarily on our defense and know that we would be, that our offense was a less stable point of, that we could rely on. And what we're starting to see, I think, is that we've managed. So there's talent on the offensive side of the ball that has proven itself in ways that we didn't expect to. I mean, with Sam Neuer's ability at quarterback, with Jarek Broussard's ability at running back, with Jaron Mangum's performances at running back so far. I mean, at Stanford, we saw Brendan Rice step up and all of a sudden sort of just like step up into a role that he was actually an impact player on the offensive side of the ball, along with the likes of veterans like Dimitri Stanley. And so I think that the offense has actually sort of begun to round itself out a little bit, and has also played this conservative brand of football that just gets the job done without taking too many risks. Mm-hmm. A lot of running game, being sort of incorporated, which just decreases the possibility of of things going wrong. And so I think that the offense will continue to play within itself. I think that the offense, that's not going to change. And like you said, what has the biggest point of weakness in the last several games with CU, and this is honestly not too dissimilar from USC in some ways, not maybe to the same extent, but they haven't managed to be able to necessarily string together 4 quarters of football in a way that doesn't allow whoever their opponent is, who they've proven themselves to be better than, to lose hope. And so, I mean, we saw it with Stanford, that Stanford, we had a massive lead against Stanford, and then all of a sudden they made it a game and we managed to eke out the win. And so eliminating that from being in the conversation in terms of this game is going to be essential. And, it's not like we've seen lots of turnovers on the offensive side of the ball that have been the reason for that, but been the reason for teams being able to get back into these games. It's been the fact that all of a sudden the defense hasn't been getting the same kinds of stops that it was earlier in the game. And so I think you're exactly right. It's going to be super, super important for our defense to be able to step up and play, keep their foot on the gas, for lack of a better term, for all 4 of those quarters.
Yeah. So the kind of look the comparison stats that ESPN has against the matchup. Surprisingly enough, CU has obviously only through 2 games. CU has averaged only allowing 122 rush yards against 2 teams that are very run heavy. That we saw against UCLA with a mobile quarterback like DTR, and we saw against Stanford with a really underrated running back core. Yeah. So it's really going to come down to that. But we've allowed 315 passing yards, and with someone like Keaton who can sling the ball really well and find his open targets and find his really talented wide receivers, I really think it's going to come down to our ability to rush the quarterback, and we've shown that we have the ability to. That needs to be sustained over 4 quarters. You can't let up the gas, like we both said, and it's really about trying to limit his big play ability and his ability to extend plays and find guys 30, 40 yards downfield. And if we force them to run the ball on the ground and really, really take the ball out of Slovis's hands, I think that's our best shot to win. Just because while we've seen our secondary is better than we expected it to be this year, we haven't faced the talent caliber that Keaton Slovis is. No disrespect to DTR or Alec Mills, but Slovis is probably top 2 in the Pac-12 in terms of quarterback. Him and the quarterback at Oregon. So it's really going to come down to our ability to take the ball out of his hands and really, really try to force the ball on the ground, of which we've shown that we can stop the run, and basically just keep the ball out of the air. I think that's a good formula for success for this team.
Yeah, I think you really sort of hit an important point there, which is I think that we're likely to see sort of what, we've talked a lot about the defensive firepower that we have in Nate Landman and in Mustafa Johnson, and sort of that whole defensive line. But we haven't really seen our cornerbacks and our safeties sort of get pressed a whole lot in the air. Mm-hmm. And I mean, in addition to Keaton being, one of the absolutely, one of the best quarterbacks in the Pac-12, let alone the country. I mean, the kid, he's an immensely talented quarterback. I think it's important that, we can't also overlook their wide receivers, right? So, I mean, Keaton's got a ton of passing yards this season. because he's got an offensive line that protects him and because the kid's got an arm. But I mean, with the likes of like Amon-Ra St. Brown, this kid's, he's been at SC for a couple of years now, and he's got an older brother playing for the Packers, a twin brother who plays for Stanford, and it's like the kind of thing, or maybe it's younger brother, but there's like this whole sort of lineage of St. Brown wide receivers that they're just like ridiculous athletes. And I mean, the kid just like, he gets up in the end zone. It's the kind of thing where like in the red zone, Keaton can throw a post to him and he's going to get up and over a defender. Same thing with Drake London. Drake London, a freshman last year on the team, but I don't know if he saw a whole lot of playing time. This year, his sort of kind of burst onto the wide receiver scene for USC, in this traditionally pass-heavy offense that, the kid is a ridiculous athlete. He played on the SC basketball and football teams last year. I mean, he's like, there's not a whole lot of people who can play in the two most competitive D1 sports, let alone a single one, right? And so, not only does Slovis have a lot of talent himself, but he's got a lot of talent to pass to, a lot of options, and we haven't really seen our cornerbacks get tested a whole lot, and our safeties get tested a whole lot. And so I think it'll be really, really interesting to see what we have in store from a pass defense perspective, just because that aspect of our team has not been tested yet.
Yeah. I want to stay on the topic of individual positions, more specifically players, the X factor players that are really going to be able to change this game. I think, like you just mentioned, that secondary. So that really untested secondary with those safeties and those cornerbacks, you're going to play a large part in our ability to win this game, to ability to really press this really, really deep wide receiver core, force Slovis to find his third, fourth option, which are usually only 5 to 6 yard dumps downfield, which we can live with. But if we constantly get burned with the long ball and these 25, 30 yard slant passes down the middle or seams up the sideline, this secondary is going to get burned all day. So it's really going to come down to that secondary. And in terms of offense, I think we've shown that Neuer has the ability to be the X factor on offense. But the one name to look for is Katie Nixon. I think he's coming back from injury. He hasn't played at full speed yet. But man, if he really gets going, he's the type of guy who really, really can change that offensive game for Colorado.
I agree. So yeah, I think I'm super excited to see KD come back from injury. I mean, I know the kid's been itching to get back out, and Durrell and Cheverini have been a little bit reticent to let him go and and sort of get running around full speed too early, because the kid's got a super bright future ahead of him, not just at CU, but beyond. I mean, he's definitely going to be, be an NFL player after his time at CU. And so I am super excited to see him jump into this offense. And what's remarkable is that his addition to this offense is just it almost just feels like a bonus right now, because this team's been performing, so unexpectedly well from an offensive perspective. But what then that also sort of opens up, which we haven't seen a ton of. We saw some of last game. Certainly we saw a little bit more of against Stanford than we did against UCLA, is the kind of passing game that Sam Neuer brings to the table. We know that he doesn't necessarily have the biggest arm in the world. What I'm more sort of curious to see is his decision making, whether, if we then sort of open our offense up to a little bit more of a pass heavy offense, given the fact that KD's healthy, and then we've got Brendan Rice, we've got Levante Chenault, we've got this sort of slew of guys who both young and sort of veteran players who have the just really remarkable athletic ability, Dimitri Stanley, to be able to get the ball to. And so I think that will be, and we haven't seen Neuer, do a whole lot of decision making with the ball in his hands from a passing perspective. And so I think it'll be really, really interesting to see whether he can remain disciplined enough through that, all that stuff, in order to, keep the ball in CU's hands, whether that's either making big plays, or whether that's like whether that's making big plays, or whether that's knowing when to throw the ball out of bounds and just and live to see another down rather than turn the ball over. Because USC's, as we've talked about, USC's offense is not the kind of offense that you can really afford to give too many opportunities to. Mm-hmm. And the more time of possession, I think, for the CU offense that they're able to have, the better. Like I think the more time of possession we can see the CU offense have, the more likely the success of CU's, just the game against USC is going to go, because that's when we can just take USC's offensive firepower out of the equation. And so I'm sure that that's something that Durrell and Cheverini are sort of planning for in their game plan for the game. But I mean, as cliche as it sounds, I think Sam Neuer at quarterback and, the sort of decision-making we'll see out of him is a little bit of an X factor, just because we haven't seen that from him. And obviously, as you said, Katie Nixon's return, is a big part of that.
Yeah. I think you said it well. We like you said, we really haven't seen Neuer put into these, big time situations where it's really up to him to make the right read, know when to not just, escape the pocket, but if he can't get anything, it's just like throw the ball out of bounds, don't get hit, don't get yourself injured, don't do anything stupid, just come back, reset. But we've said this a lot, and we keep emphasizing that this defense really has to step up and play the same caliber this offense has been playing. There's no doubt this offense is going to roll. This offense is going to score points. The scheme that the coaches have set up just enabled this offense to do that. But it's really going to come down to, like you said, Neuer's ability to be a gunslinger out there, be the sheriff, be the person who's calling the shots, and that defense's ability to really dictate the pace of that USC offense and really try to limit Slovis's ability for the big play. If they force Slovis to look for his third or fourth option, or audible the play to a run play, it really enables this defense to, like I said, dictate the pace of this game, dictate how they want to play, and set up times for this really young and unproven secondary to make the plays and show that they're ready for the big time game, while also the veterans up front, like Nate Lamb, like Mustafa Johnson, are doing what they've done best for the past 4 weeks. We didn't play last week, but making the big plays, disrupting the offensive line, disrupting the backfield, and really causing Slovis to make these errant throws, make mistakes, and really get them off their game.
Yeah, I think, I think a big part of that aspect of our game, is obviously going to be having tight coverage on the outside. But it's also, going to be seeing when we can manage to sort of bring the house against the USC offensive line, especially, in those shotgun formations and stuff, whether we can manage to utilize a blitz on our, on our side of the ball to put enough pressure on him that to cause those errant throws, especially if our secondary isn't stepping up in the way we necessarily need it to be. Because as we've seen, in addition to Nate Lamb and Mustafa Johnson, I mean, Carson Wells has been absolutely sort of a monster on the defensive side of the ball this year. That kid stepped up big time. Jonathan Van Diest, another just more veteran, sort of like inside linebacker. He's just, or outside linebacker. But he's just a big guy who's like, we've got a lot of guys sort of, that can really, really put a lot of pressure on offensive, offensive team, like on offensive lines and quarterbacks and stuff. And I think that if we can manage to have their quarterback protection break down, that's going to be huge for CU. And it's going to take some of that pressure off of the CU secondary in terms of relying on them to make the big plays, because contrary to the CU offensive style of play this year, the USC style of play is to, here and there, you do see the, going, like trying to go for an 80-yard bomb, you know what I mean? And Slovis is perfectly capable of making it happen. And so if he's given enough time in the pocket, or, if a receiver is able to sort of lose his defender. And I think that it'll be really, really key for CU to be able to find alternate ways of putting pressure on that super high powered USC offense, so that way we can just force a 3-and-out, just and get back to our side of the ball, and maybe not play, maybe not have as many sort of Sports Center top 10 type offensive plays, but just move the chains and get the ball into the red zone enough and give ourselves enough chances that it ultimately is, what wins the game on, in a less sort of dramatic fashion.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what kind of players step up to the plate. But there's little doubt that this has got to be one of if not the biggest game CU's had in the past 4 or 5 years since that remarkable 2016 season. But can Colorado finally win the big game? Can they get over the hump? They had their chances last year. The game against USC, prime example. Home game, nationally televised. You had the lead, you blew it. The game against Arizona, you just got ran all over. Very winnable game. The game against Air Force, big game, you lost it. You can say all you want about us beating Nebraska at home last year, but it was the beginning of the season. It was our second game of the week. We were coming off a demolish of Colorado State. But this is a time that Colorado can finally prove that they can win the big game, that they can march into the Coliseum. Obviously there's no fans there, so you kind of take out that home field advantage. But one of the tougher plays to play in the Pac-12, march in there with a team that had no respect going into the season, that has really proven itself over the past 2 games, who's had 2 weeks to prepare to get people healthy, to really dial in those mistakes you saw in the UCLA and Stanford team. Go in there, beat a 19th ranked USC team. They're ranked nationally, so obviously people think they're good. There's no doubt that they are not a bad team. They're a very good team. Go in there, improve to 3-0, and have an inside track to the Pac-12 South title that nobody saw coming. But this is a really big proving ground game for not only this CU team, but the CU teams to come, and this team's ability to then recruit big talent and show that, hey, we're now contenders again in this Pac-12, very competitive Pac-12 South, that you want to come play for us, we're going to win these big games, we're going to win division titles.
I agree. And so, it gets held over CU all the time that, one of the sort of, it's almost become, just one, we see it, it's held over CU all the time that 14 games have been played between USC and CU, and 14 games have been lost by the Buffs, won by the Trojans. And last season's game is a perfect example. So we were winning, obviously, for most of the game. Things were looking positive. We ended up, managing to blow that game, but nonetheless, it was 35-31 final score that didn't reflect the sort of how poor Stanford's play was, nor did it reflect how positive CU's play was for the majority of that game. And I think that that's also a little bit of an unfair sort of comparison for CU, not maybe as much for USC, since it's a largely intact team as much as a college team can be, sort of from one season to another. Clay Eltner's still under, Slovis at quarterback and stuff like that. But CU is a totally different team this year, as you and I have talked about. We play a very different style of football than we are traditionally used to. And I think that this year we're playing the style of football this year that gives us a chance to win that game. Because previously, what CU's sort of fallen prey to in games like the game against USC last year and other games similar to it is the fact that, as we've talked about over the course of the show a bunch, how USC is this, high-powered offense. And last year, for example, CU had a super, super strong defense, an okay offense. Montez was inconsistent, great when he was, when he was on, not great when he was off. And as a result, it just wasn't enough to really be able to sort of put your full trust in him, at any given time. And Mel Tucker was, sort of a very head coach that that's where sort of our mindset was. Whereas this, but what we would sort of get trapped in doing is trying to go, swing for swing with a super offensive minded, offensively talented team from an offensive perspective. And that's not that was not in our interest to necessarily try to do that. And it was not in our interest to do that just because that's not the way that's not where the majority of our talent has previously lied. And that's not necessarily where our coaching mindsets are at. This year it's different. And this year we've proven that we've been approaching that in a different way the entire time. And I think that, it comes down to the fact that Darrell plays a more conservative brand of offense. And so thus far, that conservative brand of offense has benefited CU, when going against other teams that have a more sort of traditionally talented quarterback or traditionally talented, running back core, whatever. And it's benefited us enormously. So I think that if CU can play the brand of football that they've been playing this year, which is that they play within themselves and they know their limits, they know their limitations, and as a result, they just try to minimize their minimize how much they can get pushed outside of our comfort zone in terms of that, and which is running the football is more much more so than having to throw it, and playing less defense than need be, and being able to play a lot of run defense if we can. That's when if we could control every all the uncontrollables in a game, that's what we would say for CU success, right? And so the amount that they can at least manage those things that are in their control to be within their strengths is where we'll see, I think, the most success. And so and thus far they've shown that they're willing to stay within those bounds, even if they get put under some pressure, from because the score gets tight or whatever. They haven't so far strayed from that game plan. They've stuck to it, and by sticking to it, it's worked. And so if they can just manage to still do that next, on Saturday in the Coliseum, I think we have a really good chance to finally get a win in this series column against USC that has sort of, been out of reach for the Buffs for so long.
Yeah. They got to dictate the pace of the game.
Yeah.
Like they said, this offense needs long, sustained drives that, take more than 2 minutes, that really keeps that high-powered USC offense off the field, tires this very, very good USC defense that marches down the field, that plays within their means, that runs the ball up the middle and then passes it when they don't expect it, and then let our defense, who we know is capable of stopping good teams like they did last year, like they showed against basically the same USC team that played at Folsom last year. They have the ability to force turnovers, force 3-and-outs, force Keaton Slovis to become uncomfortable, force them out of their predetermined game plan and into something that, hey, they didn't think they were going to get there, and really go in and finally get a elusive win against not only USC but a nationally ranked team that has shown that, hey, we are possibly contenders for the college football playoff. We can go in there, ruin their chances, give us an inside path to that Pac-12 South title, and then possibly go up against an even better team like Oregon. But really, it just comes down to winning that game and improving to 3-0, and then putting your focus back onto the next game against Arizona. But I really think this past 2 weeks has given the chance for this team to, like I said, dial in the mistakes that they were causing, that were prohibiting them from playing complete football. The offense is only getting stronger with the return of Cason. I really think this defense kind of stood back and said, hey, played a better game against Stanford, but we didn't play a complete game, and if we don't play a complete game against USC, we're going to lose. So I really have trust in this team that they can go in there on Saturday and really cause some noise. And even if they don't win, play a complete game, play a competitive game against a very competitive USC team and say, hey, we lost this game, but there is no doubt that we are a for-real team this year. And, even though we're 2-1, we're still a great team, and we're forced to be reckoned with.
Absolutely. I totally agree. And I think that I think that this provides a great opportunity. I think the fact we're taking the fans out of the equation so far, that seems to have played out in CU's favor, and as a result, I think that that whole combination I think plays absolutely in CU's favor. And so if we can play within ourselves and and dictate the pace of the game as you just said, I think we could set ourselves up for a lot of success this weekend.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. But with that, that is all for today's show. We want to thank you guys so much for coming out. If you want to see more of us, like always, follow us on social media. They're up in the corner. Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram. Check us out, dashsports.tv. That's our website, YouTube channel at dashsports.tv. Check out Sports Pac-12, Pac-12 only website for sports. Got a lot of cool stuff there. And then this upcoming Friday, we'll be having our crossover show with one of the hosts at USC. So you'll see either Kieran or I debate one of the USC hosts about why we think CU is going to go into the Coliseum, upset a USC team, and have an inside track to the Pac-12 South, which honestly is a great possibility of happening. But with that, we will see you all next week. As always, Go Buffs.